Good morning for the 1 minute we have left of the morning.
Yeah, yeah, right. That's funny. Yeah, certainly. 11:59.
Yep.
All right.
All
Well, here
right.
we
So
are, man. Another
about,
Sunday.
yep, about halfway through Rule 14, or at least we finished the first two subsections of the rule. We'll be picking up on the treading of the way. And after that is the awakening of the centers, which we might actually get to today because it looks like we only have about 6 pages to cover here.
Okay,
So
yeah, man,
I'm
this
gonna,
is just this is incredibly deep stuff that we're digging into now. So,
yep. Well, with that, let's get right into it.
all right.
The treading of the way. We have seen, as we have considered Rule 14, that in the magical work, the critical point of objectivity has now been reached by the aspirant. He is endeavoring to become a magical creator and to accomplish two things. The first, recreate his instrument or mechanism of contact so that the solar angel has a vehicle adequate for the expression of reality. This involves, we noted, right type, quality, strength, and speed. And the second thing, build those subsidiary forms of expression in the outer world through which the embodied energy flowing through the recreated sheaths can serve the world. In the first case, the aspirant is dealing with himself, working within his own circumference, and thus learning to know himself, to change himself, and to rebuild his form aspect. In the other case, he is learning to be a server of the race and to construct those forms of expression which will embody the new ideas, the emerging principles, and the new concepts which must govern and round out our racial progress. Remember that no man is a disciple in the master sense of the word who is not a pioneer, a registered response to spiritual truth, a realized pleasure in forward-looking ideals, and a pleased acquiescence in the truths of the new age do not constitute discipleship. If it were so, the ranks of disciples would be rapidly filled, and this is sadly not the case. It is the ability to arrive at an understanding of the next realizations which lie ahead of the human mind, which marks the aspirant who stands at the threshold of accepted discipleship. It is the power wrought out in the crucible of strenuous inner experience to see the immediate vision and to grasp those concepts in which the mind must necessarily clothe it, which give a man the right to be a recognized worker with the plan, recognized by the great ones, if not recognized by the world. It is the achievement of that spiritual orientation held steadily, no matter what the outer disturbance in the physical plane life may be. That signifies to those who watch and seek for workers that a man can be trusted to deal with some small aspect of their undertaken work. It is the capacity to submerge and to lose sight of the personal lower self in the task of world guidance, under soul impulse, which lifts a man out of the ranks of the aspiring mystics into those of the practical, though mystically minded, occultists. This is an intensely practical work on which we are engaged. It is likewise of such proportions that it will occupy all of the man's attention and time, even his entire thought life, and will lead him to efficient expression in his personality task, imposed by karmic limitation and inherited tendency, and to a steadfast application of the creative and magical work. Discipleship is a synthesis of hard work, intellectual unfoldment, steady aspiration, and spiritual orientation, plus the unusual qualities of positive harmlessness and the opened eye which sees at will into the world of reality. Certain considerations should be brought to the notice of the disciple, which, for the sake of clarity, we will tabulate. To become an adept, it will be necessary for the disciple to 1. Inquire the way, 2. Obey the inward impulses of the soul, 3. Pay no attention to any worldly consideration, and 4. Live a life which is an example to others. These 4 requirements may sound, at the first superficial reading, as easy of accomplishment, but if carefully studied, it will become apparent why an adept is a rare efflorescence of a generation of inquirers. Let us take up each of these 4 points. 1. Inquire the way. We are told by one of the masters that a whole generation of inquirers may only produce one adept. Why should this be so? For 2 reasons. First, the true inquirer is one who avails himself of the wisdom of his generation, who is the best product of his own period, and yet who remains unsatisfied and with the inner longing for wisdom unappeased. To him, there appears to be something of more importance than knowledge, and something of greater moment than the accumulated experience of his own period and time. He recognizes a step further on and seeks to take it in order to gain something to add to the quota already gained by his compeers. Nothing satisfies him until he finds the way, and nothing appeases the desire at the center of his being except that which is found in the house of his Father. He is what he is because he has tried all lesser ways and found them wanting, and has submitted to many guides only to find them blind leaders of the blind. Nothing is left to him but to become his own guide and find his own way home alone. In the loneliness which is the lot of every true disciple are born that self-knowledge and self-reliance which will fit him in his turn to be a master. This loneliness is not due to any separative spirit, but to the conditions of the way itself. Aspirants must carefully bear this distinction in mind. Secondly, the true inquirer is one whose courage is of that rare kind which enables its possessor to stand upright and to sound his own clear note in the very midst of the turmoil of the world. He is one who has the eye trained to see beyond the fogs and miasmas of the earth to that center of peace which presides over all earth's happenings. And that trained attentive ear which, having caught a whisper of the voice of the silence, is kept tuned to that high vibration and is thus deaf to all lesser alluring voices. This again brings loneliness and produces that aloofness which all less evolved souls feel when in the presence of those who are forging ahead.
That's a pretty intense statement there.
Sure.
That's something that caught my attention, and I said I didn't initially understand what was meant there. There's a double layer there. Does that make sense? I don't have the words for what I pulled out of that. Do you see what's there in that last statement? That aloofness which all less evolved souls feel. So that this is directly talking about some level of emotion, right?
I think so, in a way. Yeah.
It's talking about something that really can't be explained in words. It's an old, lesser evolved emotion that he's referring to. It's a strange thing to put ourselves into that, I think, if that makes sense.
I was getting at how lonely this path is too, or how lonely it could feel. Anyway.
Yeah, that's a physics. Yeah, there's no words, but I'm sorry. I had to go into that for a second.
No worries. Okay, so continuing, so forging ahead. A paradoxical situation is brought about from the fact that the disciple is told to inquire the way, and yet there is none to tell him. Those who know the way may not speak, knowing that the path is constructed by the aspirant as the spinner spins its web out of the center of his own being. Thus only those souls flower forth into adepts in any specific generation who have trodden the winepress of the wrath of God alone, or who, in other words, have worked out their karma alone, and who have intelligently taken up the task of treading the path. the second, obey the inward impulses of the soul. Well do the teachers of the race instruct the budding initiate to practice discrimination and train him in the arduous task of distinguishing between A, instinct and intuition, B, higher and lower mind, C, desire and spiritual impulse, D, selfish aspiration and divine incentive, and E, the urge emanating from the lunar lords and the unfoldment of the solar lord. It is no easy or flattering task to find oneself out and to discover that perhaps even the service we have rendered and our longing to study and work has had a basically selfish origin, and resting on a desire for liberation or a distaste for the humdrum duties of every day. He who seeks to obey the impulses of the soul has to cultivate an accuracy of summation and a truthfulness with himself, which is rare indeed these days. Let him say to himself, I must to my own self be true. And in the private moments of his life and in the secrecy of his own meditation, let him not gloss over one fault, nor excuse himself along a single line. Let him learn to diagnose his own words, deeds, and motives, and to call things by their true names. Only thus will he train himself in spiritual discrimination and learn to recognize truth in all things. Only thus will the reality be arrived at and the true self known. Third, pay no consideration to the prudential considerations of worldly science and sagacity. If the aspirant has need to cultivate a capacity to walk alone, if he has to develop the ability to be truthful in all things, he has likewise need to cultivate courage. It will be needful for him to run counter consistently to the world's opinion and to the very best expression of that opinion, and this with frequency. He has to learn to do the right thing as he sees and knows it, irrespective of the opinion of earth's greatest and most quoted. He must depend upon himself and upon the conclusions he himself has come to in his moments of spiritual communion and illumination. It is here that so many aspirants fail. They do not do the very best they know. They fail to act in detail as their inner voice tells them. They leave undone certain things which they are prompted to do in their moments of meditation, and fail to speak the word which their spiritual mentor, the self, urges them to speak. It is in the aggregate of these unaccomplished details that the big failures are seen. There are no trifles in the life of the disciple, and an unspoken word or unfulfilled action may prove the factor which is holding a man from initiation. Interesting.
Gotta let it all go, man.
Yeah.
Or you gotta work through it all. I mean, I guess the same thing. You work through it and let it go. Look at it and then forget it.
Well, and don't leave things undone. That was what kind of struck me there, is don't leave certain things undone that you're prompted to do in your moments of meditation, or that the self, your spiritual mentor, gives you things to speak and you may hold them back. They're full. That's just,
I think as we move on, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but these little things will continually pop back up as an impetus.
oh, I'm sure.
There's no way that in my own being that's sitting here right now, that I would be quiet if I had something pending that had to be important, that had to be done right now. There's no way. Because I remember too many times in the past where that if I was being pushed, urged to take care of something, this, that, or the other thing, and I think that it should be, if we have some level of awareness, we'll know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
we'll know, we'll see it.
Four, live a life which is an example to others. Is it necessary for me to enlarge upon this? It seems as if it should not be, and yet here again is where men fail. What after all is group service? Simply the life of example. He is the best exponent of the ageless wisdom who lives each day in the place where is the life of the disciple. He does not live it in the place where he thinks he should be. Perhaps after all, the quality which produces the greatest number of failures among aspirants to adeptship is cowardice. Men fail to make good where they are because they find some reason which makes them think they should be elsewhere. Men run away, almost unrealizing it, from difficulty, from inharmonious conditions, from places which involve problems, and from circumstances which call for action of a high sort, in which are staged to draw out the best that is in a man, provided he stays in them. They flee from themselves and from other people, instead of simply living the life. The adept speaks no word which can hurt, harm, or wound. Therefore, he has had to learn the meaning of speech in the midst of life's turmoil. He wastes no time in self-pity or self-justification, for he knows the law has placed him where he is and where he best can serve, and has learnt that difficulties are ever of a man's own making and the result of his own mental attitude. If the incentive to justify himself occurs, he recognizes it as a temptation to be avoided. He realizes that each word spoken, each deed undertaken, and every look and thought has its effect for good or for evil upon the group. Is it not apparent, therefore, why so few achieve and so many fail? Moving on to the awakening of the centers. Speaking more technically, and therefore warranting the use of the word instructions in connection with this treatise for aspirants and disciples, it must be carefully borne in mind that the main task of the aspirant is the handling of energies, both in himself and in the world of physical phenomena and externalization. This consequently involves an understanding of the centers and of their awakening. But understanding must come first, and the awakening at a much later date in the sequence of time. This awakening will fall into two stages. First, there is the stage wherein, by the practice of a disciplined life and by the purification of the thought life, the seven centers are automatically brought into a right condition of rhythm, vitality, and vibratory activity. This stage involves no danger, and there is no directed thought in connection with the centers permitted to the aspirant. By that I mean he is not allowed to concentrate his mind upon any one center, nor may he seek to awaken or energize them. He must remain engrossed with the problem of purifying the bodies in which the centers are found, which are primarily the astral, etheric, and physical bodies, remembering ever that the endocrine system and the seven major glands in particular are the effectual externalizations of the seven major centers. In this stage, the aspirant is working all around the centers and is dealing with their environing matter and with the living substance which completely surrounds them. This is all that can be safely undertaken by the majority, and it is with this stage that the bulk of the aspirants in the world today are engaged, and with which they must remain engaged for a long the to come.
Time, a day is supposed to be time, is
Yeah.
certainly supposed to be there.
For a long time to come. Yeah. Secondly, there is the stage wherein the centers, through the effective work of the earlier stage, become what is esoterically called released within the prison house. They can now become the subject, under proper direction by a teacher, of definite methods of awakening and of charging. The methods differing according to the ray, personality, and egoic of the aspirant. Hence the difficulty of the subject and the impossibility of giving general and blanket rules. It is interesting here to note, even though it has no bearing on the matter of personal training, that this method, first of a long period of purification and later of energizing scientifically, is the one employed by the guiding hierarchy which stands behind world affairs. Steadily, they have been working at the task of clarifying world matter and bringing about world purification on a large scale. This is the first stage of the work and only became generally possible when man became a more truly thinking entity during the past few centuries on a wide level. This purification is going on now in all departments of human existence, for humanity now stands, or rather 3/5 of it stands, on the path of probation. Through welfare and uplift movements and the widespread of sanitation, the work goes forward on the physical plane. Through political upheavals, which reveal abuses, through economic discontent, which is after all a striving to change that which is undesirable so as to give the human unit conditions of living, which will lead to thought and from thought to soul control, through religious propaganda and the efforts of the many organizations and groups throughout the world which hold before the minds of men that I might symbolically call the hope of heaven, using the word heaven as a symbol of perfection and of purity, the work of the stage is going steadily forward. So successfully has it been that now the filth and impurities which surround the world's soul and which keep humanity from its true expression are known and recognized, and there is consequently a steady drive towards betterment. All has been brought to the surface, and the result seems appalling and uncontrollable to those who only see the surface. But underneath, the deep river of purity and truth is flowing strong. One evidence of the success of the world movement towards pure living and the destruction of that which hinders is that the work of the second stage is now in process of initiation. The hierarchy, for the first time in world history, can now work directly with the centers in the body of humanity. Thus, we have now the formation of the new group of world workers who, in their totality throughout the world, constitute the heart center and the center between the eyebrows of the etheric body of the human family. Through the one, spiritual life can begin to flow in and vitalize all the centers, and through the other, the vision can be seen and the inner world sensed and known. I would here like to point out two other matters, and so clarify the entire situation. There is much confusion on the subject of the centers and much erroneous teaching, leading many astray and causing a great deal of misapprehension. First, I would state that no work such as an effort to awaken the centers should ever be undertaken whilst the aspirant is aware of definite impurities in his life, or when the physical body is in poor condition or is diseased. Neither should it be undertaken when the pressure of external circumstances is such that there is no place or opportunity for quiet and uninterrupted work. It is essential that for the immediate and focused work on the centers, there should be the possibility of hours of seclusion and of freedom from interruption. This I cannot too strongly emphasize, and I do so in order to demonstrate to the eager student that at this period of our history, there are few whose lives permit of this seclusion. This is, however, a most beneficent circumstance, and not one to be deplored. Only 1 in 1,000 aspirants is at the stage where he should begin to work with the energy in his centers, and perhaps even this estimate is too optimistic. Better far that the aspirant serves and loves and works and disciplines himself, leaving his centers to develop and unfold more slowly and therefore more safely. Unfold they inevitably will, and the slower and safer method is, in the vast majority of cases, the more rapid. Premature unfoldment involves much loss of time and carries with it often the seeds of prolonged trouble. Overstimulation of the brain cells is necessarily one of the results of the merging by an act of will of the fires which circulate in the human body. Such stimulation can produce insanity and the breaking down of the cellular structure of the brain, and through the overactivity of the cell life can also induce that internal friction between them which will eventuate in brain tumors and abscesses. This cannot be too strongly reiterated. Excuse me. The underlying objective in all Laya Yoga work, or work with the centers, is based upon the fact that the energy of the cells which compose the body, or the matter aspect, called in the Secret Doctrine and a Treatise on Cosmic Fire, fire by friction, must be blended with the fire of consciousness. This latter is the energy present in matter, yet different from the fire of matter itself, which underlies the entire nervous system, and because it so underlies it, produces sensitivity and awareness. It is the cause of response to contact and confers the ability to register and record impression, as you well know. This fire is technically called solar fire, and when it blends with the fire of matter, and with the electric fire of the highest divine aspect, then man's being comes into its fullest manifestation, and the great work is completed. But it is a most dangerous undertaking when induced before the mechanism is ready to deal with it. This triple blending can only be safely undertaken by the highly organized and rounded out person, and by one who has achieved the capacity to focus his attention in the head, and from that high point direct the entire process of fusion. It involves the ability to withdraw the consciousness literally into the etheric body, and yet at the same that I think that's supposed to be time too, at the same time to preserve in full awareness a point of contact in the head, and from that point direct the automaton, the physical body. It presupposes, if successful, certain etheric conditions in the body. One of these is the process of burning through or destruction, partial or complete, of any obstructions found along the spinal cord, which could prevent the free rising of the fire at the base of the spine, commonly called the Kundalini fire, which lies quiescent, latent, and potential in the lowest center. This is the sleeping serpent which must arise and uncoil. Each center in the spine is separated from the one above it and the one below it by an interlaced protective web, which is composed of a curious blend of etheric and gaseous substance. This has to be burned away and dissipated before there can be the free play of the fires of the body. The complete network of nadis and centers underlies and is the subtle counterpart of the nervous and endocrine system. A little clear thinking, therefore, will demonstrate the need for excessive care, for there will obviously lie a direct effect upon the external apparatus, and this in its turn will definitely affect what the psychologists call behavior. There are 4 of the interlaced circular webs lying between the 5 centers found on the rod of the spinal column, such as follows. And there's 5 zeros separated by 4 forward slashes. And these are to be found in the head. These 3 bisect the head and form a series of crosses as follows, referencing this symbol there. This is much like the cross upon the Union Jack, which has always had an esoteric significance for the student and indicates a point in racial evolution. This cross in the head separates the ajna center, the center between the eyebrows, from the head center, for it lies behind that center in the forehead, and at the same time forms a protective shield between the ajna and throat centers.
Wow. Okay. Very interesting there. If we consider the setup. I've read this before, but I never really picked up on it that way. Sorry.
Well, as is the case, the more we read this, I think
Yeah.
the more meaning that kind of blossoms out of it. So, where was I? These etheric webs, right here.
Yeah.
So these etheric webs are in reality disks, rotating or revolving at specific rates, which differ for the different centers and according to the point in evolution of the system of centers concerned. Only when these webs are burnt away by the ascending and descending fires can the true centers really be seen. Many clairvoyants confuse the centers and their protective counterparts, for the latter have a radiance and light of their own. As the life achieves an increasingly high vibration through purification and discipline, the fire of the soul, which is literally the fire of mind, causes the centers also to increase their vibration, and this increased activity sets up a contact with the protective webs or discs of pranic energy found on either side of them. Thus, through the interplay, they are gradually worn away, so that in the course of time they become perforated, if I might use such an inadequate term. Many aspirants feel convinced they have raised the Kundalini fire at the base of the spine and are consequently making rapid progress, whereas all that they have accomplished is to burn or rub through the web at some point or other up the spine. A sensation of burning or of pain in any part of the spine, when not due to physiological causes, is, in the majority of cases, due to the piercing of one or other of the webs through the activity of the centers allied to them. This happens very frequently in the case of women in connection with the solar plexus center and with men in connection with the sacral center. Both these centers, as a result of evolutionary development, are exceedingly active and highly organized, for they are the expression of the physical creative nature and of the emotional body. A sense, therefore, of burning and of pain in the back indicates usually undue activity in a center, which produces destructive results upon the protective apparatus and is no true indication of spiritual unfoldment and superiority. It may indicate the latter, but it should be remembered that where there is true spiritual growth, pain and danger are in this connection practically eliminated. There has been much loose talk about the raising of the Kundalini fire and much misapprehension in the matter. Let me assure you that it is most difficult to raise and can only be done by a definite act of the will and through the intense mental focusing and concentration attention of the man seated on the throne of consciousness in the head. The Masonic tradition has the teaching clearly held in its beautiful ritual of the raising of the great Master Mason. Only when there is united effort of a fivefold kind, and only after repeated failure, does the vivifying life course through the entire body and bring to life the true man. The second point I would touch upon is that all this deeply esoteric work must only proceed under the direction of the skilled teacher. Platitudinously, the aspirant is told that when the pupil is ready, the master will appear. He then settles comfortably back and waits or focuses his attention upon an attempt to attract the attention of some master, having apparently settled in his mind that he is ready or good enough. He naturally gives himself a spiritual prod at intervals and attends spasmodically to the work of discipline and of purification. But steady and prolonged undeviating effort on the part of aspirants is rare indeed. It is indeed true that at the right moment the master will appear. The right moment is contingent upon certain self-induced conditions. When the process of purification has become a lifelong habit, when the aspirant can at will concentrate his consciousness in the head, when the light in the head shines forth and the centers are active, then the master will take the man in hand. In the meantime, he may have a vision of the master, or he may see a thought form of the master, and may get much real good and inspiration from contact with the reflected reality, but it is not the master and does not indicate the stage of accepted discipleship. Through the medium of the light of the soul can be known. Therefore, seek the light of your own soul and know that soul as your director. When soul contact is established, your own soul will, if I may so express it, introduce you to your master. With all due reverence again, may I add that the master waits not with eagerness to make your acquaintance. In the world of souls, your soul and his soul are allied and no essential unity. But in the world of human affairs and in the process of the great work, it should be remembered that when a master takes an aspirant into his group of disciples, that aspirant is for a long time a liability and oft a hindrance. Students overestimate themselves quite often, even when repudiating such an idea. Subjectively, they have a real liking for themselves and are frequently puzzled as to why the great ones give them no sign nor indicate their watching care. They will not, and they need not until such time as the aspirant has used to the full the knowledge which he has gained from lesser teachers and from books and printed scriptures of the world. Students must attend to the immediate duty and prepare their mechanisms for service in the world, and should desist from wasting time in looking for a master. They should achieve mastery where now they are defeated, and in the life of service and of struggle, they may then reach the point of such complete self-forgetfulness that the master may find no hindrance in his approach to them. It will be apparent, therefore, from the above that I cannot give specific instructions as to the awakening of the centers and the burning of the etheric web, which will result in the release of energy. Such information is too dangerous and too intriguing to be put in the hands of the general public, who are driven by desire for some new thing and lack right poise and the needed mental development. The time has come, however, when the fact that there is an energy body underlying the nervous system must be recognized by the world at large, and when the nature of the seven centers, their structure and location should be grasped technically, and when the laws of their unfoldment should be widely known. But more than this cannot yet be safely given. The intricate nature of the science of the centers is too great for general usefulness. The teaching to be given in any particular case and the methods to be applied are dependent upon too many factors for a general rule and instruction to be given. The ray and type, the sex and point in evolution must be considered, and also the balance of the centers. By this I mean the consideration as to their overdevelopment in one case and underdevelopment in another, and as to whether there is a preponderance of the force below or above the diaphragm, or whether the main energy is concentrated in that central clearinghouse, the solar plexus. Excuse me. The quality and the brilliance of the light in the head has to be studied, for it indicates the measure of soul control and the relative purity of the vehicles, and the various etheric webs have to be carefully dealt with, and also the rate of vibration of the web and the center. A synchronization has to be set up, and this is most difficult to bring about. These are only a few of the points that the teacher has to note, and it is apparent, therefore, that only a teacher who has achieved synthetic vision can see a man whole, or as he really is, can give those instructions which will reverse the ancient rhythm of the centers, destroy without pain and danger the protective sheaths, and raise the Kundalini fire from the base of the spine to the exit in the head. Such teachers are found by the pupil when he has carried forward his life work under the direction of his soul. When he has grasped the theory of the science of the centers and has mastered and controlled the astral nature and its corresponding center, the solar plexus. The emphasis laid upon the dominance of the Christ principle by Christianity has laid a sure foundation for the work to be done. This truth is curiously substantiated in a study of the number 8 in connection with the centers, which we are told is the number of the Christ. There are 8 centers if the spleen is counted. All of them are multiples of 8, with the exception of the center at the base of the spine, which has 4 petals, 1/2 of 8. In our day and in the Anglo-Saxon mode of writing, the number 8 is the basic symbol of all the centers, for the petals are really in form like a number of superimposed 8s. The word petal is purely pictorial, and a center is formed on this pattern. First, a circle, O, then 2 circles touching each other and making, therefore, an 8. Then, as the petals increase in number, it is simply a growth of these double circles superimposed at different angles, one upon another, until we arrive at the 1,000-petaled lotus in the head. These centers are, in the last analysis, twofold in function. They demonstrate the form-building aspect of divinity, and through their activity bring the outer form into manifestation. Then, towards the end of the evolutionary cycle, both in the macrocosm and the microcosm, they bring into expression the soul force and life and produce the incarnation of a fully revealed Son of God with all the powers and knowledge which divinity contains. And that closes out Rule 14. That was quite a bit to take in, even if it took a short 40 minutes. So it seemed to be a theme there of not allowing yourself as a don't be careful about letting yourself get ahead of yourself.
I didn't see that.
You didn't see that at all?
No, I saw that you will not get ahead of yourself.
Right. Otherwise, you won't be allowed to move forward.
I saw that it won't even happen. That's how I kind of read it. Like, it's not gonna, you're not gonna be focusing there when you're not supposed to, essentially. Well, when it's time to focus on those places, you will. Right?
Right.
I often, when I think about these things, I often remember there's maybe earlier in this book or one of the others where he talks about, you have to know whether in this life it's more about the head or the heart, heart-centered or head-centered. And the heart-centered being more mystical, and then the head being more being the occult, and that's for the the individual to figure out. And as we go along a little bit, I think it becomes very easy to figure out because those centers in the head will let you know what the direction is. All right, you're gonna know. And it does, and it's all consuming. You're not gonna know.
Right.
You'll be led in that particular way. Yeah, what an incredible, as we read this, you're you're looking at the life of people. You're looking at people's life and development and outer expression of everything that we see with our eyeballs. And every human is somewhere along the path of evolution. And it's just such an amazing thing to be able to see that, I guess. Right? And even if they don't know, what we're talking about here, we know. Not to say that we know where everybody's at or trying to figure that out. That's not what I mean. We can look at each person and see that they're at some point along in this, and
Oh yeah, definitely.
So interesting.
Well, you can look at anybody.
Right.
Well, I mean, you or I could look at anybody now and know that they're somewhere on the path. They just might not recognize it.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Certainly. Yeah, and you do know,
because we're all on this path. It's just you need to be aware that you're actually on it, and otherwise you're getting stuck down here as an automaton.
Well, if you and I didn't know each other, and we just happened to meet, right, just now for the very first time, you would shortly later, after having talked to me through my disposition and the way I talk and the things that I've said, if we're having any level of contact, you would figure out that my entire life revolves around this. It wouldn't take you long to figure that out. And I would figure out the same about you. And then through that, we would know that we're on the path, It wouldn't take very long because it would come out because there's the awareness is there that we're on the path. And that we're an example, a current example at some point or another of the path. And then in the things that we're saying, we can talk about where, the things that we're at. And then, the interesting part about that is when we start talking to more highly evolved people, they see things through the higher perspectives to where they know where you're at based on the words that you said to them. And I don't mean you by any stretch. I mean you as the people, as the world. You talk to somebody who's more advanced, and then that person who's more advanced, they know where you're at based on the words that you just said in that moment. They know exactly where you're at, what plane you're coming from, right then and there. Because the way that you're speaking to somebody right then and there, that's where you're at. There's no cheating. Right?
Right.
What you're expressing is what you are right then and there. So what example you are is that's it. You're giving yourself away. You're an open book to more advanced beings, right? And because they're seeing the significance of the words, they're not looking for your meaning or the depth of the things that you're trying to explain. They don't really hear any of that. They hear the logic and the significance of what's back behind the words. It's so wild to begin to learn how it, the way the perspectives are seen. And then we give away where we're at. And then in giving away where we're at, we can see which centers are dominant. Because we know where we're speaking for. They know where we're speaking from. And then also they can see, like, and it says here that they can see on the higher levels, right? Well, we don't necessarily know what to see means either,
Mhm.
right? So this is a truly incredible thing. And we did talk about this before this, actually, the connectedness
Mhm.
of the centers and,
Right.
and with humanity, and a man can see the whole. This unraveling is absolutely incredible. So you and I can sit here and read these things, and then we can, we can go much, we can talk to this from the mental plane a little bit, and see that this material really does bring about the illumination and the synthesis and all that of the material of what is happening in the life of us and those around us. It's real, and I think he says at some point, the person, the student of the ageless wisdom, understands totally the human condition.
Mhm.
And this is absolutely part of that, of understanding. So yeah, incredible stuff, bro. Just mind-boggling to me.
No doubt.
This 1,000-petal lotus and how the centers come into play, and the transference from the lower as the solar plexus transfers everything to the higher. There's a very incredible change in that, in the beingness of the person, of the individual. Once it's all transferred from the lower to the higher, there is a distinct dimensional change that is it's very profound as far as I understand. And it's in that moment, and it's in that twinkling of an eye that the lower, there's a rebirth in that too. And that's what happens apparently at the third initiation. That happens at the third initiation, which is, what all these books are, geared to bring us to the understanding and get us to that point. So there's a lightning bolt that separates the top from the bottom at that point, and everything's
Like a major, that'd be a major rebirth, because you don't think there's any.
No, there's a lot, but
I was
that
gonna
is
say I feel like we're rebirthed quite a bit in the earlier stages of this process too. So
certainly,
yeah,
but that's why they call the third, the first major,
right.
is because there's such a drastic happening there, transference, and it does happen in the
Ooh, excuse me.
eye, to where there's a death,
Right.
and and it's been explained just that there, this is an actual, we're going through the death process while alive, the dying process, but there's no such thing as real death, right? So we die while alive, and and then into life more abundant.
I think there's an art to it and an understanding that goes along with it. Speaking of, in terms of death, and I think DK talks a lot about that throughout all of the materials. So
like you just said, we go through it many times because there's crisis, there's tension, and then there's emergence. And if we look on the chart at every permanent atom there that we're looking at, it implies a crisis, tension, and an emergence. And that's all expressed in life experience. So that's expressed. We can actually see that, and it's experienced in the life of the individual. At the first initiation with the physical permanent atom, and then the second initiation, and then all the way up at the top of to the mental permanent atom there at the third, and that's the big one, because it includes all the lower three worlds below. But what an interesting place to be at that mental unit, right?
Mm-hmm.
To have experienced everything on Earth and to not need any more human experience. There's no more desire to do anything, to own anything, there's no stone that's been left unturned down below. But having absolutely no clue as to what really comes at the higher either.
Right.
What an incredible spot to be at there, to be almost with the soul to almost be walking in the new world. It's such a wild ride, man. So can't make it up. Very beautiful. But don't kid us, right? Like there's challenges.
Oh yeah. And there's going to be.
The challenges differ, because once you're done with the emotional challenge, right? Once you've tamed the desire nature, and once you've let go of emotional attachments, the whole challenges now become much different, right? Because you take the emotional aspect out of it, there's no fears gone, right? So now you're just looking at things very realistically. So there's going to be challenges, but the challenges are not going to be emotional, right? They're not going to cause any depression or something, like any level of, there's no anxiety built into the challenge now. There's no emotional, aspect that's going to cause you to do anything irrational. The challenges become much more, the decisions we make are much more logical, based on reason and intuition and such. So but the hard time is that's the most challenging point, is when there's desire, like we talked about here,
right?
And there's emotion, and that's completely natural. And you can't imagine that we can move past that, right? Like that's something that we could actually get past. And then the next thing, but then you do, right? Because then we do get past it. And then, and it's like, well, oh, did I get past that? Because then it's like, well, I didn't realize I was past that. And it's like, well, there's no emotional response to this, and I don't really desire anything now. And then it's like, well, how long have I been past that? And I don't know if you really know either. So it's like this, it happened. It's something that happened. It was burnt away. It was gone. And then you don't realize that it's gone because you're not looking for it because it's not there.
Right.
It's like, you know, the aspirant or the disciple, these changes happen and you may not even realize it. Somebody else is more likely to realize it happened in you before you do. Because they see the changes that something's missing. You don't see something missing because to you, it's not even there.
Right.
And that is at every little step on that ladder, the whole way up, climbing that, you know, Jacob's ladder there. So we have a little initiations every step of the way, or little expansions and, you know, the whole process. It's just, you know, it's great, man. It's just beautiful.
Well, we're nearing the end here. Rule 15 is the last, so we'll pick up there. We'll get that started next time. And I'll probably read it again alone.
You know, the radiation part of it, the illumination part, the fire part, you know, it just takes time for these things to play out. So we don't need to be in any big hurry.
Right.
It's something that there's natural course to it. And it's more like the personality can only get in the way, right? That's it. That's all the personality can do. So in most of the cases, it's just best to just be quiet.
And it will. And I'm looking for something that we read here.
Astrological. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Certainly astrology would come into play at that point too, right? Like, and our nodes and such, and all of our retrogrades and the whole makeup at that point is really that's what's said, because this book is designed to get us to the second initiation, right? Like ultimately, you know, through the second initiation. And that's the hardest point because of the emotional aspect and desire nature. You know, it's talked about quite a bit in here. That's the hardest point of this.
Here's what I was looking for right here.
Yeah, I think the best thing to do at that point is to, you know, focus on, you know, the purification.
Right.
And that purification is different than, and he says it's different, right? It's not just purification of the body and that it's mental purification and emotional purification and desire, you know, like, where are your desires set? Like, what do you live for, man? You know, because you can be a first degree initiate, as far as I understand, and you're still going to be in the world fully.
Right.
So at that point, it's like, well, where are your loyalties, and what is your life about at that point? Are you about partying? Are you trying to live your best life and manifest your best life, or is your focus above? Are you looking down or up or down, right? And if you're looking up, all these things are going to be shown to you. We'll have the awareness, we move past them, and then we keep going up. The minute we start really looking down, that's where we can fall back into the ignorance and get lost again. And because that's that mosh pit there, that the
Yep.
desire, the astral, that heavy lower astral, goo that we got to move through, like sloshy kind of, it's foggy.
Yeah. Well, that's what
But
we've talked quite a bit about throughout this entire, since the beginning with Carla too. That's what a lot need to focus on working out before moving up into these higher stages. And it even alludes to it in here, the bit that I have highlighted, and you touched it a bit when you responded to that first section I had highlighted. But it's best to focus on working out all of that. It's just like it says here, serve with love and works and disciplines himself, leaving his centers to develop and unfold more slowly and therefore more safely. Slower and safer unfold, they inevitably will. So that stuff's going to work. If those centers are going to work them, you're going to get to work those centers in once you've hit that stage where you've reached that point of purification and you're serving with love and discipline in yourself and you're working selflessly and things like that. All this is going to work out. But to try to focus in on those centers before you've ripped through that part and
that's
ironed out
dangerous.
those wrinkles, it says it right here, premature unfoldment involves much loss of time. So you're just wasting time. It's dangerous and you're wasting time. And it carries for the seeds of prolonged trouble. So you're not doing yourself or humanity any service by allowing yourself to think you can move ahead of the process. And it makes it difficult for some because they're very much stuck in that and we see it as the thing. It's like the thing that's out there is, like you said, living your best life.
Well,
But
there's
they
also
look
that part where he's talked about directly in here about wanting to be somewhere that other than where you're at.
Mhm.
And that is, a hugely profound statement.
Yeah.
Too, because then you're not in the flow with what is. You're trying to bully around these energies and you're trying to manifest up something personally. You're not the observer at that point. Because the observer is not trying to bully around this thing. Now, there's still latent, I say latent, there's still some desires that are going to hang on inevitably, right? Just being logical about it. There's going to be a remnant of, there's going to be a last desire that falls off, right?
Mhm.
Inevitably. There's going to be one last thing that dude, the dweller on the threshold, or whoever, is holding on to, man. Every person's going to have the one thing that you're going to be all the way at the end. You're going to be purified for the most part. You're going to be, have this clean life, all these things. But inevitably, there's going to be this last thing or the apparent last thing that has to fall away.
Mhm.
That's going to keep driving you on. And, it's just a matter of figuring out what these things are. Like what, and then, seeing yourself with them falling away too, right? Like working, because it's like, well, I don't know how in the world I'm going to give that up or something.
Right.
Or I gave it up and then it'll creep back in. I'd slither back in and then it's like, well, there it is again. It's like, well, how do you permanently drive, by, how do you drive by that and then leave it like, miles back? How do you beat the race on that? And it's like, well, you just have to keep going higher. You have to drive higher. Like you can't leave. You're not going to beat the astral plane, right? You have to move through the astral plane.
Right.
You're not going to beat it. You're not going to fix the astral plane. You have to move past it.
I don't think it's there for fixing anyway, right?
No, yeah, but like
you're foolish.
So it's like, well, how am I going to get? How am I ever going to get over this thing that I've been holding on to? You're going to get over it by getting above it,
Mm-hmm.
and then when you get above it, it drops below the threshold. So you have to give it some time and just work through it and push it off and deal on it, look at it, and keep it. And as the thoughts of it come through, just let them go by and then don't act on it if you know it's not appropriate. You got to rise above it. That's,
you do. And those things become easier to recognize too, as you progress along and continue to develop your conscious, raise your consciousness, develop more awareness. Because you recognize those things as they're coming to you, and you might still indulge in it to some level, but you recognize that why am I doing this, or probably really shouldn't be doing this. I'm just thinking of like eating poorly, things like that. But you recognize those things more, so that you can deal with them. I mean, there's some folks out there that don't even recognize it as something that they need to give up yet. I guess is what I'm getting at. So
if you've got to give something up, then you'll know, I believe, man. I think we know.
Right.
I think. Now, I could be wrong about that, but I think,
But that's kind of what I'm getting at. It's like you recognize it and you need to dissolve this away in order to keep marching forward here in this respect. And then you work to do that. But you realize that it's something you need to give up when you realize that you need to give it up. I don't really know where I'm going with that, but
all right. Well, here's something that's not allowed, right? Let's talk about this. There's rules of the road that, and DK talks about this. There are rules for each level of this.
Mm-hmm.
And the rules down low are different than the rules up higher.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll know, essentially, we should know what we can and can't do at that point. We'll know, right? And then the decision is, in order to not get, to drop down like a rock, it's to not do the things that are going to get you dropped. And what are those things? Well, it's selfish or evil. I mean, what you would call evil, I guess, but right or wrong, good or bad, however, you can't be doing things that are going to drop you down. Like, as we move on, we know that we can't drink alcohol. Like, you will sink like a dang boat anchor, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're really trying to get up higher, you cannot be doing drugs anymore. And if you think that's okay, nobody here is ever going to tell you not to do that.
Right.
We don't mind if you do it. Knock yourself up. Do whatever you want. Go get everything that you want out of your system. That's not, because then that's only going to be beneficial for later, because there's a lot of
Right.
implications in the statement that says you have to have had filled in that plane and have had all the experiences so that you're not going to be drawn back to it later.
Right.
So there's a lot of deep implications to that, to where if you're holding on to something that you need to do, well, you probably just need to go do it. You're just delaying that you're
Mhm.
going to probably do it later on inevitably anyway.
Where it could
So
be
just go
more,
knock it out.
right.
Uh,
And it could be more destructive if you hold out and it hits you at a later phase and you you know
yeah,
what I mean?
we
But
we
I
can't
would
be held by anything.
I would sense though that you're not even going to make it there if you're still holding on to that to begin with.
Right. You
Right.
got to be magnetically released from all these things,
Right.
essentially. Right. So, drugs and alcohol, those things we know, that's something that you can do immediately to damage yourself because it's self-destructive, and we know it is.
Mhm.
We know that that's self-destructive. And it drops your consciousness like a dang rock. So some of, at a certain point, you're just not going to go there anymore. And as a matter of fact, you won't even think about it anymore. Not to say that you didn't do those things for years, like a champion.
Right.
At some point, it's not worth it. It's so not worth it. Oh my God. Can you imagine? I can't even. I said, that's if you were going to have a nightmare, that is a nightmare. The thought of doing something that can ruin, your life basically, and ruining because that's what he says. We talked about earlier. There's still a danger.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the danger of the astral plane, is we're drawn back into that desirous nature. Even as we're working our way out of it on the mental plane, and we're coming up on the mental plane, you're still operating down here for a while. So you're being drawn, like, and I still kind of want to do this thing. I still enjoy getting high with my friends. Well, that's why we're still down there.
Mm-hmm. Right.
When potentially we don't even know that we're delaying our growth at that point until we know, right? Anyway, it's all perfect, right? Like the whole thing, it makes perfect sense as we become wise about it, I guess. But I heard a guy the other day, and this is a strange thing, man. This might have been yesterday on YouTube or something. I was scrolling around. He says, you're still going to do everything after enlightenment that you did before enlightenment, basically, he said.
Mm.
And I was like,
everything?
yeah, I was like, this dude is, I really hope he doesn't have a lot of followers.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. I'm like, this is not a beneficial statement to anybody. This is selfish. And
well, it's probably a false enlightenment too that he's
oh,
experienced, because if I can't speak for this man, but I would imagine that anyone who has that level of thought, it indicates to me that they're still doing those things, but yet
right.
think they've been enlightened somehow, and it does
Well,
not
buddy,
happen.
the higher levels of the astral plane are very idealistic, as we know,
Mhm.
right? Very mystical, even, right? So, and is there a level of enlightenment in that? Yeah, okay. Awakening, sure, whatever. because you're coming above it at
Right.
times.
Might get it, might catch a glimpse of it. Right.
Well, you certainly think that you're enlightened at the high levels of the astral plane.
Right.
You certainly believe that you've made it to something. And I get told, Carla laughs at me because of when she first met me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was, there was like rapture, like I was meditating. I'd be like wrapped in the love of the universe. And, everything was just beautiful and magical. And there was all of this emotional response
Mm-hmm.
to everything, highly emotional, right? And idealistic. And is that some level of awakening? You can't, whatever, however you want to categorize it. Don't. On the chart, though, where we're looking at here is what? We're looking at the higher levels of the astral plane now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not really where we're trying to get to. So immediately it's like, what?
Right.
And even still on those levels, what you see, I believe, is that psycho-spiritual, psychedelic movement. That's all astral.
Mm-hmm.
That's all astral. So if you're still out there doing we're doing mushrooms and ayahuasca and, looking to DMT to give us some sort of experience, well, all you have to do is do it once, and you know that this thing ain't what we thought it was.
Right. Well, you and I talked about that earlier too, where that's, you do something like that once and have some mystical experience associated with it, and associate that with enlightenment and think that's what is, and you stay there, and that's dangerous because you're supposed to be moving on beyond that.
Well, right? Guess what, too, man? Every one of those experiences that people have, mm-hmm. It all wears off.
Mm-hmm.
So you can probably have, and it could probably get you to some real level of peace. And I know this to be the case, that I've had this conversation about ketamine in particular, just ketamine therapy. Well, you're supposed to do it like every 3 weeks or every month. If you have to do something every 3 weeks or every month, you ain't there, buddy.
Exactly. The substance is bringing you there. And you have to maintain yourself on that substance.
Well, the question about that is, where the hell is it even bringing you? Right. So an occultist is going to look at the molecular structure of the thing, mm-hmm. to see where that's even bringing you. But people don't even know where you can know that. And it is not up higher above the high levels of idealism on the astral plane.
Right.
If anything, it's bringing you down potentially into the mineral, where it's so empty and you've made yourself into a rock, the consciousness of a rock at that point. Which, yeah, you want to call it escaping from the world. Sure, yeah, you did. You made yourself into a dang rolling rock. Rocking and rolling, man. As we're up higher, it is all very much more clear and logical, and there's reason, and you can see the meaning of things on the mental plane, on the lower part of the mental plane. We see the symbols, we understand them, and then we're working on the intuition, and that's what, yeah. But yeah, I mean, so when we talk about how we know where somebody's at, Oh, if you're still living a regular life, like what you looks like, and yeah, that's where you're at, man. I mean, if you're still trying to find, a weekend ayahuasca ceremony, well, that's where you're at. You're trying to find a weekend ayahuasca ceremony. I'm like, what do you mean, dude? Well, I mean, you're at the point where you're still trying to find something illusory, or
Right.
go into some, high idealist experience on the astral plane. That's it. And is there something wrong with that? No. There's something wrong with it when we come above it to go back down into that. Can't do that. But if you're in that space and that's what you're doing, just know that's what you're doing. If you're, it's just so common sense. It's more plain than anybody wants to admit. Like, oh, I go drink on the weekends. Well, you're holy all week long, saying prayers to whatever and doing this and that. And then on Friday night, you're at the restaurant and you're drinking $5 margaritas. Well, guess where you're at in your life at 5 o'clock on Friday in the eternal now? You're drinking margaritas, bro. It don't matter what you did all week. You're drinking margaritas. So, and then you say, well, that's not really what no, that is exactly what you do. That's the mental plan. Like, that's how logical things become. I don't smoke pot that often, but in the instant that you are smoking pot in the advance of this thing,
Right.
guess what? That's where you're at in your life right now. And you can say, well, that's not really where I'm at. It's exactly where you're at.
Because you're there. You were there.
You're there.
You're
in
right.
that space.
Yeah.
You've brought your mind down into the vegetable or up, I don't know, wherever you're at. It brought you to that vegetable kingdom spot, and that's where you're at. So that's makes things pretty crisp and clear. Because then all of life starts to look like that. The whole life looks like that. Like everything is completely logical and laid out in front of us. Right? And then, then we got to deal on that a little bit, because that takes some getting used to. But then there's also how to approach yourself and the situation at that point. And then we recognize that once we recognize that, and we're more as the observer in the now, you're never going to go do that again. You may go to the restaurant at 5 o'clock on Friday, but you're not going to be drinking the margaritas.
Right.
That's that simple. You may be with your friends who are smoking pot all day and enjoying their company. Has nothing to do with you, though.
Right.
I have no part in that. As where before on the astral plane, we certainly did have part in that. Right? We went out of our way
To be a
to
part of that.
partake in those things. We risked legal consequences at times to drive to this place or that place after having drinking beers, or any of the other types of things. So where are you at in your life? Well, that's where you're at. When we get to this place that these books are getting us to, we see all that from the higher place and we're observing, but we don't have any part in any of that anymore whatsoever. Because now we're just observing this whole thing. There's no partaking in it. We're just the awareness of it, right? It's awesome, man. But But if you're hurting to get through those spots,
Mhm.
right? Like if you're like, I got to get over this and get through this, and this is driving me nuts. I don't want to do these things anymore. How do I break out of this? Well, you will. Inevitably, you're going to, because the first part of that is recognizing that what you're doing isn't really right, right? And then working through all that and looking higher to the soul, and then we get through it. We really do. I mean, we really do just get through it, man. It's awesome. And then there's freedom. There's a level, some next level of freedom in that. And from a high spiritual place, that may not look like a big deal to some, but it certainly is a big deal from where we just come from. Anyway. So pat yourself on the back, and then we move out again. Ruck up, and now we're moving out again.
Yep.
We got a mountain to climb. Anyway, yeah, we got into it there a little bit, huh?
We did. It was good. All right. Well, I think we can call it a wrap.
Yeah. Okay, buddy.
We'll pick up 15 next time. We'll see where that takes us. I don't think we'll get through 15 in one session. It looks like it's a good 43 pages long. I think we average about 12 pages, 15 pages a session. So we'll see.
Very good.
It's the final rule. It's the final
Great,
rule.
man. Awesome, amazing book. Magical book. Okay, I'm stopping this guy.
So